I'd been sick for 3 days when it happened. Not just the sniffly, mopey kind of sick, but the full-on body aching, fever sweating, can't keep anything down kind. And my roommate Evan, he became someone I didn't expect. When I first moved in with him, I thought we were just two guys splitting rent. Nothing special. He was clean, paid bills on time, kept to himself mostly. I liked that. I didn't need drama, especially not during my last year of grad school. Evan was the kind of guy who seemed to have it all together. Tall, annoyingly fit, and with this calm about him like nothing ever really rattled him. We didn't hang out much, maybe a few beers during the playoffs or quick small talk in the kitchen. That was it. But there were things I noticed. Little things, like how he always made 2 cups of coffee in the morning, even though he knew I'd probably overslept. Or how he never complained when my cough echoed through the apartment walls that week. He just existed in this quiet, steady way, like a background hum you didn't know you'd miss until it was gone. Anyway, I was a mess. Barely left my bed. Barely ate. On day 3, I woke up drenched in sweat, shirt clinging to me, mouth dry as hell, and the room spinning. I dragged myself out of bed and stumbled toward the kitchen for water. That's when I heard him. "Jesus, man, you look like you lost a fight with a microwave." I blinked at him. Evan was standing at the sink, shirtless, wearing just gym shorts. He had a towel over one shoulder and an expression I didn't expect. Actual concern. Normally I would have joked back, but I was too far gone. I think I muttered something about dying. Next thing I knew, he had an arm around my waist, guiding me to the couch. "Sit down before you fall down," he said. He handed me a cold rag from the freezer and filled a glass of water. Then, without asking, he started wiping my forehead with that rag. It should have felt weird. Intimate, even. But it didn't. It felt safe. "You really should have told me you were this bad," he muttered, shaking his head. "You're burning up." I gave a dry laugh. "Didn't want to ruin your week with my plague." He rolled his eyes. "You're not ruining anything. You could have passed out in the hallway." I leaned back and let the cool rag rest on my face while he poured some juice into a mug. Then he came back and knelt down in front of me, holding it out. "Here, small sips." And for the first time since we'd started living together, I actually looked at him. Not a passing glance. I looked. The way his brow furrowed, the way his fingers tapped the mug like he wasn't sure if he was doing too much. "You always this good at taking care of sick guys?" I asked, my voice hoarse. He smiled. "Just a little. Only the ones I live with." There was a pause. Not long, not awkward, just quiet, and something about that quiet stuck with me. The next day, I woke up on the couch under a blanket I didn't remember pulling over myself. The glass of juice was empty on the coffee table, and there was a bottle of Tylenol with a sticky note beside it. "Take 2. Hydrate. Don't die." I couldn't help but smile. Even sick, half dead and gross, Evan had this way of being casually thoughtful. Not in a grand, flashy way, but in the kind that stuck with you long after. I still felt like crap, but the fever had broken. My head wasn't spinning as much, and my throat had gone from lava to just moderately sandpapered. I dragged myself into the kitchen, and Evan was already there, dressed in a hoodie and joggers, barefoot, nursing his usual mug of coffee. He glanced up when he saw me and nodded. "Still alive? Impressive." "Barely," I croaked. "Bathroom's got fresh towels," he said, already turning back to whatever he was doing on his laptop. "And I left some soup in the fridge. You're gonna want to eat something before the meds." I stared at him, blinking. "Are you always like this?" He looked up. "Like what?" "Responsible. Domestic. Weirdly attentive." Evan shrugged, barely suppressing a grin. "Maybe I just don't want your half-dead body stinking up the apartment." I laughed, which immediately turned into a cough. He slid a water bottle across the counter toward me without missing a beat. I sat down at the kitchen island, clutching the bottle like it was holy. "You're really hard to read sometimes, you know that?" Evan didn't answer right away. He clicked something on his laptop and then shut it. "You mean that in a bad way?" "I mean, I started slowly. We've lived together for 7 months, and I think this is the first real conversation we've had. He leaned back in his chair, arms folded, that half smirk still playing on his face. We've had conversations. Yeah, like, you forgot to buy paper towels, or is this your moldy Tupperware? Classic roommate bonding. He deadpanned. I rolled my eyes. I'm just saying, you kinda came out of nowhere with the Florence Nightingale routine. He shrugged again, but this time, there was a flicker of something else in his eyes. Hesitation. Or maybe caution. You needed help, he said, and I wasn't gonna just ignore that. There was a beat of silence. Then he added more quietly, besides, I like taking care of people. That hung in the air between us a little longer than either of us probably expected. I cleared my throat. Well, thanks, seriously. No problem. But the way he said it didn't feel like no problem. It felt like something else. Something heavier. That night, after a shower and some food, I felt almost human again. I parked myself back on the couch with a blanket, flipping through Netflix aimlessly. Evan came in around 9 with a bowl of popcorn and flopped down next to me without a word. We didn't speak for a while. Just sat there, side by side, watching some mindless comedy we weren't even paying attention to. Then, mid-episode, he said, I broke up with my girlfriend 2 months ago. I turned to look at him. That was random. Oh, I didn't know you were even seeing anyone. Yeah, he said, voice low. Wasn't serious, just didn't feel right. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. He didn't look at me. Just kept his eyes on the screen. She said I was emotionally unavailable. I laughed before I could stop myself. No offense, but I kinda see that. He smirked. You're not wrong. More silence. Then he added, it's not that I don't feel stuff. I just don't always know what to do with it. That time, I didn't laugh. We sat there a while longer, the space between us shrinking without either of us moving. And I realized something. He wasn't hard to read. He was just scared of being seen. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed for the first time in days. I dragged myself in there sometime after midnight, trying not to overthink how close Evan and I had gotten on the couch, or the fact that our knees had been touching for at least half the movie, and neither of us had moved. I stared at the ceiling for a while, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe it was just the leftover fever messing with my head, but when I walked into the kitchen, Evan was there again, hoodie hanging loose, hair damp from a shower. He didn't say anything at first. Just poured a second cup of coffee and slid it toward me without even looking. You're up, he said casually. I nodded. Slept like a rock. That's good. You look better. I sat down, wrapping my hands around the mug. Thanks again for everything. He shrugged like it was no big deal, but I could tell. He heard it. All of it. And it meant something. You know, I said after a moment, I think you might be the nicest, emotionally unavailable person I've ever met. He smirked, sipping his coffee. That's my type. Mysterious but helpful. That got a laugh out of me, and the tension that had been floating in the air since the couch moment seemed to ease a little. Still, there was something else building underneath it all. Something unspoken that neither of us wanted to name just yet. Later that day, I was sitting on the floor of the living room, sorting through a pile of mail and unopened Amazon boxes, my way of pretending I was being productive. Evan came in from his room holding a hoodie I'd been wearing the night before. Hey, he said, tossing it at me. This is yours, right? I caught it, nodded. Yeah. Sorry, I think I left it on the couch. He lingered in the doorway for a second too long. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, You want to go for a walk or something? Get some air? It was a random offer, especially from him. But I wasn't about to turn it down. Yeah, I said. Sure. We ended up walking through the park a few blocks from our apartment. It was chilly, that dry post-rain November air, the kind that made you bury your hands deep in your pockets. We didn't talk much at first. Just walked, side by side, matching each other's pace without thinking about it. Evan finally broke the silence. I used to think emotions were like weakness. Like if you showed too much, people would take advantage of it. I looked over at him, surprised by the sudden honesty. But lately, he continued, I've been wondering if maybe I just didn't trust people enough to see that side of me. I nodded slowly, not sure what to say. It wasn't the kind of thing you respond to with a joke or a half-hearted platitude. I don't know why I'm telling you this, he said, hands still deep in his hoodie pocket. I guess you've been easy to talk to lately. That hit me harder than it should have. I didn't know what changed exactly, but something had shifted between us since that night. And not just because of the fever or the late-night couch bonding. It felt like he was letting me in. Not all the way, but a crack in the door. Maybe you just like having someone around who doesn't expect anything from you, I said, trying to keep my voice light. He stopped walking and looked at me. I don't think that's true. We stared at each other for a beat too long, his expression unreadable. Mine probably a mess of confusion and hope. Then he added, quieter this time, I think I like having you around. I didn't know what to do with that. The words hung in the air like they were waiting for permission to exist, and all I could do was say, yeah, same. We kept walking, but everything felt different now. Our hands brushed once, lightly, just enough to make us both pause. Neither of us pulled away. We didn't talk about that walk afterward. Not directly, anyway. It was like we'd reached a point where something important had been said, without either of us knowing what to do with it next, so we fell back into our rhythm. Kind of. We still made coffee in the mornings, still passed each other in the kitchen, still watched dumb movies on the couch, but now there was this quiet undercurrent to everything. Like the air between us had changed density. I started noticing things more, the way he'd glance at me when he thought I wasn't looking, how he'd find reasons to stay in on Friday nights when he used to go out, how his hoodie sleeves always had that faint smell of clean laundry and whatever subtle cologne he used. I also noticed I didn't mind when his leg pressed against mine on the couch. In fact, I liked it, and I think he knew. One night, about a week after I'd fully recovered, we ended up watching something neither of us was really into. It was late, past midnight, one of those nights where the city felt quieter than usual, and even the hum of the fridge seemed louder. Evan was next to me, stretched out a bit more than usual, his shoulder brushing mine. He hadn't said much all evening, just small comments about the movie, but I could tell he wasn't focused on the screen. Neither was I. Then he spoke, softly. You ever think about how weird it is that we ended up living together? I turned to look at him. Weird how? He shrugged. I mean, I almost didn't respond to your listing. I was about to move in with someone else, some guy who lived over in Mission Hill, but the morning I was supposed to sign the lease, something told me to back out. That was, what, a day before I posted the ad? He nodded. Yeah, just one of those weird coincidences. I smiled faintly. Could have been stuck with some dude who leaves socks in the sink and steals your almond milk? He laughed, and for a second, the tension cracked. But then he looked at me, really looked, and the smile faded into something softer. I'm glad I didn't. The room felt still, like time was waiting for us to do something with that moment. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. Yeah, me too. There was a pause. Then, without really thinking, I asked, Did you mean it? He tilted his head. Mean what? What you said at the park, about liking having me around. His jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't look away. Yeah, I meant it. It got very quiet. Then he said, Did it freak you out? No, I said immediately. Not even a little. That seemed to surprise him. He shifted, sitting up a little straighter. His knee was still pressed against mine, and now I felt it even more. He started, then trailed off. I haven't said something like that to anyone in a long time. Me either, I admitted. So maybe we don't have to figure it all out tonight. He nodded slowly. I like that idea. We sat there a while longer, the TV still playing in the background, but our attention locked on each other. Eventually, he nudged my foot with his. You want to sleep out here? He asked. I could grab you a blanket. I'll crash in the chair. I hesitated, then said, or we could both crash on the couch. His eyes flicked up to meet mine, and he didn't smile this time. But something in his expression softened, like the edges were falling away. "Okay," he said. So we did. We didn't touch. We didn't say anything else. But we fell asleep close enough that I could hear the rhythm of his breathing. And somehow, that was enough. I woke up first. The sun was barely up, casting a soft glow across the apartment, and everything felt unusually still. I shifted slightly, careful not to wake him. Evan was curled slightly toward me, one arm bent under his head, hair a mess and lips parted just enough to make him look stupidly peaceful. For a guy who carried himself like he had it all together, he looked so soft like this, human, quiet. My eyes drifted over the details, the way his collarbone peeked out of his hoodie, how the stubble on his jaw caught the early light. I knew I shouldn't be staring, but something about that moment felt suspended, like the rules were paused. Just for now. I turned my head and looked at the ceiling, trying not to let my thoughts spiral. What was this? We hadn't kissed. We hadn't even held hands. But something had shifted between us, and I couldn't ignore it. I didn't want to. But I also didn't know what came next. I must have dozed off again, because the next thing I felt was movement. Evan was stretching, his arm brushing lightly against my side. "Morning," he mumbled, his voice groggy. "Hey," I said, sitting up slowly. "Sleep okay?" He nodded, rubbing his eyes. "Better than I expected. You?" "Yeah," I said. "Same." There was an awkward beat of silence, the kind that comes when two people are dancing around something they don't know how to name. He sat up, running a hand through his hair, and looked at me with that same unreadable expression he always had when he was trying to play it cool. "You want coffee?" he asked. "Always." He stood up, and I followed him into the kitchen. He moved like he always did, quiet, efficient, knowing exactly where everything was without needing to look. But there was a different energy now, more deliberate, like we were both aware of the space between us. He handed me a mug, and our fingers touched for a second longer than necessary. Neither of us said anything about it. We stood there, drinking quietly. Then he broke the silence. "You know," he said, not looking at me, "I've been thinking a lot about stuff." "Stuff," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. He shot me a look. "You know what I mean." I nodded. "Yeah, me too." He shifted, leaning back against the counter. I've never really had this kind of connection with a guy before. Or anyone, really. Not like this. I didn't say anything right away. Just let his words settle in the air. "I've dated," he continued. "But it was always surface level, safe, predictable. And this," he gestured vaguely between us, "doesn't feel like that at all." I set my mug down carefully. "You're not the only one confused, Evan." That made him smile, a little. "Confused, huh?" "Well," I said, "you were the emotionally unavailable one. I'm just the guy with a sinus infection and boundary issues." That made him laugh, the kind of laugh that felt unguarded. Real. He stepped closer, just slightly. Close enough that I could feel the warmth coming off him again. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yeah." He hesitated. "If I kissed you, would that make this more confusing or less?" I felt my pulse quicken, but I didn't look away. "Let's find out." He leaned in slowly, giving me space to back out if I wanted to. But I didn't. And when our lips met, it wasn't some movie-worthy dramatic moment. It was soft, careful, like we were both figuring it out in real time. It lasted only a few seconds, but when we pulled apart, everything felt different. Evan stepped back, his expression unreadable again. But this time, I could see the difference. He wasn't hiding anymore. "Less confusing," he said quietly. I nodded. "Yeah, same." He ran a hand through his hair again and muttered, "Okay, Well, now I definitely need more coffee. I laughed and we moved back into our usual rhythm. But the current running underneath everything, it wasn't subtle anymore. Something was happening. And for once, I wasn't afraid of it. After the kiss, we didn't fall into bed. There was no dramatic confession, no whirlwind of hands or shirts being pulled off. Instead, we just existed. Together. In this new space we'd carved out without even realizing we'd been doing it. And honestly, that felt more intimate than anything else could have in that moment. Over the next few days, things between us were quiet, but not in a distant way. More like calm, grounded. We didn't talk about the kiss right away, but there was a comfort in the silence, a kind of mutual understanding that neither of us wanted to rush it. That whatever this was, it wasn't a game or a phase or a random accident. It was something. One night, I came home late after working on a group project. Evan was in the kitchen, standing at the stove, stirring something in a pot like he'd been waiting for me. He looked up when I walked in, gave me this small, tired smile. "Hey," he said, "you eat yet?" "Barely," I replied, kicking off my shoes. He turned back to the pot. "I made soup. Figured you'd forget." And just like that, my chest did this weird little ache thing again. Because he knew. Without asking, without prying, he just knew. We ate together on the couch, bowls in our laps, feet brushing lightly every now and then. Nothing was said, but the closeness was unmistakable. Easy. I kept stealing glances at him, trying to memorize the way his jaw moved when he chewed, the curve of his smile when he caught me looking and didn't look away. Eventually, he set his bowl down and leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I keep waiting for this to feel weird," he said, staring up at the ceiling. I tilted my head. "Does it?" He looked over at me. "No, that's what's weird." I smiled faintly. "Yeah, I know what you mean." He reached over then. Not dramatically, not nervously, just placed his hand over mine, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You know," he said, his thumb brushing my skin, "I don't know what this is yet, but I know I don't want it to stop." I looked down at our hands, then back at him. "I don't either." We sat like that for a while. No TV, no distractions, just two guys who accidentally found something in each other they hadn't even been looking for. That night I was brushing my teeth when Evan knocked on the bathroom door. "You good?" he asked. I spat into the sink, wiped my mouth. "Yeah. Why?" He leaned on the doorframe. "Just felt like you were in your head." I looked at him in the mirror. "I'm always in my head." He stepped closer. "You thinking too much about us?" "Kind of," I admitted, "but not in a bad way." "Okay," he said, stepping up behind me. He rested his hands on my shoulders, just lightly. "Well, let me know when you're done thinking." I turned around, slowly. "What if I'm ready to stop?" He didn't say anything, just closed the space between us and kissed me again, slower this time, more certain. And this time, we didn't stop. We ended up back on the couch, half tangled under a blanket, lips swollen, breath short. Still fully clothed, but everything felt exposed anyway. He kissed the side of my neck like he wasn't sure if he should, then did it again like he knew. And somewhere between the quiet and the closeness, I realized something. This wasn't just about attraction or curiosity. This was about us. Whatever we were turning into, it felt real. Things didn't go back to normal after that night, but they didn't explode into something dramatic either. It was a shift. Quiet, steady, like two tectonic plates slowly clicking into place. Subtle, but irreversible. Evan started doing little things differently. He'd wait for me to wake up before making coffee, just so we could sit together in the morning. He started brushing my shoulder when he passed behind me, like his hand couldn't help but reach out. When we watched movies, he stopped pretending it was just about the movie. His arm would find its way around the back of the couch, or sometimes just around me, full stop. And I stopped pretending I didn't love it. One night, we went grocery shopping and didn't talk about what we were doing, but we filled the cart like a couple. arguing about oat milk brands, choosing a frozen pizza we'd like, talking about splitting the price of a new toaster like it was some big domestic investment. In the car ride home, he reached over and just held my hand. No build-up, no look, no smirk, just his hand sliding over mine like it had done it 1,000 times before. I looked down at our fingers, and then I looked at him. "What are we doing?" I asked softly. Evan didn't glance over, just kept his eyes on the road. "We're figuring it out." "And what if we can't figure it out?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Then we stay here, in the figuring it out part, together." That answer, simple and sure, did more to steady me than any label ever could. About a week later, I had friends over for a game night. Nothing major, just a few guys from school and a friend from work. Evan hung around, polite but quiet, letting me take the lead on hosting. But every now and then, I'd feel his eyes on me from across the room, not in a possessive way, just watching, like he was proud of me in some small way. At one point, someone asked, "So how'd you and Evan end up rooming together?" Before I could answer, Evan, who was standing in the kitchen pouring drinks, said without looking up, "Craigslist, real romantic." The room burst into laughter, but I noticed how he smirked to himself afterward, almost shy. Later, after everyone left and we were cleaning up, I nudged him with my hip. "Real romantic, huh?" He grinned. "Hey, I didn't say it wasn't working." We were standing near the sink when he suddenly went quiet, his back to me, scrubbing at a plate. "You ever think about where this is going?" he asked. I leaned against the counter. "All the time. Does it scare you?" "Sometimes," I said honestly, "but not because of you." That got his attention. He set the plate down and turned to face me. "I'm not perfect," he said. "I still don't know what I'm doing. Half the time I want to say something, I don't, because I think I'll mess it up." I stepped closer. "You haven't messed anything up." His voice was low. I like you. A lot more than I expected to. And it's not a phase or some curiosity thing." I smiled. "I know." "You do?" "Yeah," I said. "Because I feel the same." He looked at me then, and that unreadable expression I'd seen 100 times before, it wasn't unreadable anymore. It was just Evan. Open. Real. Scared. Maybe. But grounded. He kissed me again. Right there in the kitchen, with a sponge still in one hand and water dripping off his wrist. And it was perfect. 3 months later, we still hadn't called it anything. No label, no boyfriend talk, no big dramatic Instagram posts or heart-to-heart breakdowns over wine. But every morning started with coffee for two. Every night ended with the soft sound of his voice saying, "You coming to bed?" Like it had always been that way. And honestly, that was enough. There was this one morning, nothing special, just a Saturday, rain tapping against the windows, both of us slow to move from bed. Evan had his arm slung over my chest, his forehead resting just under my jaw, still half asleep. I was scrolling through emails when he murmured, "Turn that off. You're ruining the vibe." I snorted. "The vibe?" "Yeah," he said, shifting a little closer. "The domestic, cuddly, hot boyfriend vibe." I froze, then looked down at him. "Hot boyfriend, huh?" He didn't open his eyes. "Did I say that out loud?" "You did," he groaned. "Damn. Guess we're labeling things now?" He opened one eye. "We don't have to." I paused. "I don't mind it." He stretched, arm pulling me in tighter. "Cool. Then yeah, you're my boyfriend. And also the sickest looking human I've ever seen during flu season." I laughed, full on this time. "You're never letting that go, are you?" "Absolutely not." There were still moments of awkwardness. Weird little fights about laundry or dishes. Moments where one of us got quiet instead of saying what we meant. But those things didn't feel like deal breakers anymore. They felt like parts of something real. One night, after a stupid little disagreement about who left the freezer open, we both sat on opposite sides of the couch in silence. I was annoyed. He was clearly annoyed. But eventually, he reached over, grabbed my foot, and started absent-mindedly rubbing it. "I don't want to be mad at you," he said without looking up. "I don't want to be mad either," I replied. And just like that, the fight was over. That's how things went. Not perfect, not fantasy, just us. Messy, grounded, close. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Like in the middle of brushing my teeth, or while I was halfway through folding laundry, or while I was talking to someone on speakerphone. And every time, his face had that look, like he'd found something he didn't realize he'd been looking for. I think I had too. Because it turned out the person who brought me soup when I couldn't stand, who watched over me when I was too out of it to ask for help, was also the person I wanted next to me in all the boring, quiet parts of life. And all it took was one fever, one quiet night, and one unspoken feeling that grew into something neither of us expected. So no, it didn't start with love. But it's definitely where we landed.